The NFL Draft is 3 weeks from tomorrow, Thursday, so I thought we'd look at Field Yates' 2-round mock draft, see his selections for Atlanta. Now, before we dive into this mock draft, join the channel if you have not already. We need 51 more subscribers to get to 34,400. I really want to get to 35,000 before round 1 of the draft kicks off. So help me accomplish this goal. If you have not subscribed yet, consider doing so and click that sub button. Now, let's look at Field Yates' mock draft. Starting in round 1, we've got Cam Ward going number 1, no surprise, followed by Abdul Carter. Then you've got Shedeur Sanders and his teammate Travis Hunter rounding out the top 4. That, I think, is somewhat expected, but if I had to throw a wrinkle, it's I don't believe Shedeur is going to go as high as other people believe he will. Mason Graham goes to the Jags at 5. I've seen that a million times, like Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders. Now, this is where things really start to get interesting in my eyes. The Jets at 7 in this mock go with right tackle from Missouri, Armand Membo. The Panthers at 8 take arguably my number 1/number 2 player in this draft for the Falcons, Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia, followed by Shedeur Stewart going to New Orleans. Let's pause right here and talk about Stewart because Walker always feels like a little bit of a long shot, but Stewart I could see going anywhere from New Orleans at 9 to the Eagles at 32. This pass rusher class is all over the board. It's really a preference, right? It's as if you stacked a great 5-star Chinese, Italian, and Mexican restaurant. They're all great in a lot of ways, but it's just a preference thing. So for me, my preference is I like pass rushers that have some level of production, not 1.5 sacks. I don't care how great of an athlete you were at the combine. Football is game played with pads on. It is not played in Indianapolis in February. So I'm going to go and say no thanks to Shedeur Stewart for Atlanta at pick number 15. Moving on, at number 10, as we get closer to the Falcons at 15, the Bears go with Will Campbell from LSU, really good left tackle. The Niners select Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan. Tet McMillan, the Arizona receiver, finding a new home in Dallas. Will Johnson goes just 2 picks before the Dirty Birds to Miami. Then it's Tyler Warren falling all the way to the Colts at 14. And with the 15th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Mike Green, defensive end out of Marshall. So let's discuss, because this is a name that, commonly comes up in Falcons mock drafts. And that's what made Falcons mock drafts kind of fun this offseason. There's a handful of different names we've seen tossed out there for pick 15. Now, what I want to begin with Mike Green is talking about the production he had last year for the Thundering Herd, because he led the country, if you don't know, in sacks with 17. It was a true breakout campaign, 23 tackles for loss, 59 pressures. A lot of people were doubting him because of the level of competition playing in the Sun Belt. Go watch the tape from Ohio State, because he went up against some linemen that are going to get picked in round 1 and 2 of this mock draft, and he did not have much of an issue. Now, Green did not test at the combine. He opted to test at his pro day, and he tested through the roof. His 3-cone, which is a good use of measuring a defensive end's bendiness, 6.85 seconds. Had he tested at the combine with that time, it would have been number 1 by a mile amongst all linebackers and defensive linemen. Iowa's Jay Higgins led the combine with 7.01. Now, it's worth noting a lot of the heavy hitters did not test at the combine, so you were missing some of the best athletes in a lot of ways, like Abdul Carter and Mike Green. But he would have finished first in 3-cone and barely missed out on first for the 20-yard shuttle. I'm going to make my stance on this very clear right now. When it comes to testing, 1, I don't put a ton of weight into combine or pro day testing for certain positions and certain types of testing. Pro days have a hometown stopwatch. If you've noticed, some of the testing from the combine to players' pro days are not like 1/100th of a second off, but sometimes a whole 1/10th of a second off. Like the Texas running back was more than a 1/10th of a second faster in Austin than he was in Indianapolis. So something's not adding up here. But ultimately, I'm looking for football players. I'm not looking for track stars. How many times have we seen the Falcons take a great defensive player or take a player in general that's an awesome athlete, and 2 or 3 years later, it's not working out, and no one seems to remember, but he was really fast that one day in February in Central Indiana. Has not happened to me yet. So I'm looking for football players. I'm not looking for track stars. Is it good to be fast and strong and tall and wide? Yes, it is. Is it the number one thing in my decision-making process? No, it is not. So this is kind of the background on Green because I think there's a very good chance he is the pick for Atlanta. There are some skeletons in his closet. He transferred from Virginia to Marshall. Why? Well, turns out not once but twice he's been accused of sexual assault. Now, no charges have ever been filed against him. He denies both of these incidents happening. One happened allegedly in high school, the other allegedly at Virginia. It's also kind of weird when you look at his time in Virginia because he didn't play, then he played, then he didn't play, then he transfers. So a lot of people are speculating the transfer was a result of the sexual assault allegation. So there is a lot of homework for teams to do on Mike Green to make sure they are comfortable with the character and player and person they are getting, not just 17 sacks last year. Now, ultimately, do you want to see Atlanta select Green at pick 15? If Will Johnson and Jalen Walker are off the board, I think this is probably my preferred choice for the Falcons. I'm kind of in between him, Mykel Williams, and James Pierce, but I'd be very, very much on board with Green at 15. Moving on, let's see who the Falcons passed on that they could have taken. You got a couple of offensive linemen going off the board between Arizona and Cincinnati. I don't think they're going to go receiver with Matthew Golden going to Seattle. Malachi Starks, the Georgia safety, that's a name to keep an eye on, but I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Omarion Hampton, no, they're not taking a running back. They're not taking a quarterback with Jackson Dart going to the Steelers. I don't think they're going to take a tight end unless they really want to turn the page from Kyle Pitts. Mykel Williams, he falls to the Green Bay Packers at pick 23. So Williams has been a tough nut to crack because I've seen mock drafts where he goes as early as New Orleans in the top 10. And I've seen mock drafts where he goes right around here at 23 to the Green Bay Packers. So no one's got a good idea as to where I'm going to say 4 edge rushers go in round 1. Mykel Williams, Mike Green, Shamir Stewart, and James Pierce. And if you've noticed, we've only seen 3 of those 4. So we got Pierce coming up in a little bit. At 24, the Vikings select Jahdae Barron, the do-it-all utility DB from Texas. I love his versatility. I think it's going to translate well to the next level. Donovan Jackson goes to the Texans to support their offensive line. Kentucky DB Maxwell Harrison to the Rams. And then James Pierce Jr. going to the Ravens at pick 27. Let's pause again and talk about Pierce for a moment because he had an incredible 2023 season. Incredible 2023 season. All the way too early 2025 mock drafts that came out the day after last year's draft had him going first overall to the Carolina Panthers. This is a big fall from 1 to, 26, 27, somewhere in that range. So 2 reasons jump out to me as to why. The production dripped down. Like he got to 7.5 sacks this year. I wouldn't say no-showed in some of their bigger games, but didn't have as big of an impact in some of the bigger games as people like me would have hoped for. The other concern is locker room. There have been some rumors that have come out from high school teammates of his and even some whispers from Knoxville that he's a bit of a head case. And he's got some, Andy Bernard in him dealing with the case of the Grumpies. So that is another piece of homework that any team has to do on him to make sure they are comfortable with, investing a first-round draft pick into him. Then the Lions at 28 go with Derek Harmon out of Oregon. I don't think Atlanta's going to go with Harmon, but if they want to replace Grady Jarrett, that's a good name to replace him with. Nicky Minwari, I think he's my favorite safety in this class. He is just built like a linebacker, but runs like a safety. He goes to D.C. We got the Patriots adding to their offensive line after going with Travis Hunter, so they trade up back into round 1. The Raiders also trade back into round 1 to select Luther Burden. And the Eagles conclude round 1 with Jahad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. This is a name that I've seen mocked to the Falcons a couple of times, so don't sleep on him. Personally, I would pass. I just don't think he's that outstanding of an inside linebacker. I know he played a little bit in high school at that outside position, but Jalen Walker is the only tweener I'm willing to budge on because I just think he's an incredible player. Campbell, who was the best player on Alabama's defense last year, and I'm not trying to say he's not a good football player, but for what Atlanta's needs are on defense, I'd rather go with a more traditional edge rusher with two exceptions, and only two. Will Campbell, Jalen Walker. Now, before we move on to the rest of today's mock draft and look at the round 2 selection, shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. Springtime is here and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash today. Here's an example of what selections look like. Now, if you were like me watching the Braves game late last night in LA, you could just take the less on all the batters for the Braves because no one seems to want to hit that ball. But check out Prize Picks today. They call Georgia home. It's an awesome place to have a little bit more interest while watching baseball, which over 162 games, we all can all agree, can get a little dry at times. The second half of basketball season is here as well. Push to the playoffs is heating up on Prize Picks. It's the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Going over to round 2, we've got a couple of guys to keep an eye on here. Let's start with, how about the Tennessee Titans? Yeah, let's go with the Titans pick here because they went with Boston College defensive end. It is Donovan Izuruku, and I think this is a name that I should be learning more about because at round 2, if Atlanta decides to surprise everyone a little bit and select a corner in the second round or select a defensive tackle, more of an interior guy than a traditional pass rusher, this could be a really good option. Izuruku was an incredible production player last year for the Eagles. 16 and a half sacks. He was just off of Mike Green. Now, big breakout 2024 season after, a quiet 2-3 years leading up to it. But I think there is a lot of upside to him. Athletically, he's quite gifted. So there's a lot of traits to fall in love with. I just feel that him playing at Boston College had him fall off the national radar. And he didn't get that, great shining moment in a huge game for the Boston College Eagles where it really put himself on the map. So I like that pick for the Titans a lot. Kenneth Grant is another name to keep an eye on because if Atlanta decides, hey, we really want to replace Grady Jarrett early in this draft and find our new heart and soul of the interior defensive line, you could argue, well, they did that last year with Rook, but if they want to double down a little bit, Grant, he's got an incredibly high ceiling, but there are some games and quarters where he just no-shows. But the guy's 331 pounds, and he moves like a cat. So someone's going to fall in love with this kitty cat. Josh Simmons, Tyler Booker, a couple of linemen going next. We got Emeka Ibuka and Jaden Higgins, a pair of receivers off the board. Then the Bears add another running back. The Jets go with a tight end. The Niners add to their line. Travion Henderson going to the Cowboys. And now with the 46th pick in the NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo. So some background information on the Rocket, right? 6'4", 305 pounds. So from a physical trait standpoint, he checks all the boxes. He's got the size, he's got the length. Now, he doesn't have the best initial burst. He played 6 years at Toledo, and this past season, he was second team All-MAC. I don't want to put all my stock into media-given awards, but if you played 6 years in the MAC, I'd hope you could be first team All-MAC. I don't know who was first team above him. It's no one that went before pick 46 in the draft, so maybe it's someone who goes in next year's draft. However, that's a decent red flag to me. Like, you're going to play 6 years in a group of 5 conference. I'd hope that final season you are a country mile ahead of everyone else if you're going in the top 50 of the draft. 3.5 sacks. So you're not finding someone with an incredible pass rush upside here, but he did show a lot of flash and potential. The more I read and the more I watch about Alexander, the more I just come away with, hey, this is someone who could be a good rotational player. I'm not going with good rotational player at pick 46. Round 3, okay, right? You're not going to have your choice the pick of the litter. But at pick 46, I'd hope that you'd have someone a little bit higher up on your draft board than rotational defensive lineman. So there are a lot of players who are going to go after this one that I would have preferred for Atlanta. Quite literally, the next pick. I would have taken Nick Scorton over Darius Alexander. I would have taken Azariah Thomas out of Florida State, who goes 49 to Cincinnati. I couldn't even be convinced to go with Chevron Ravel, the corner from ECU, who goes to Seattle, that has a lot of physical traits that teams like, good length for a corner and great speed, but he suffered a torn ACL early in 2024. Hell, I could have even been talking to Jared Wilson to replace Drew Dahlman at center. Benjamin Morrison is another name to watch for here. Let's say the Falcons go pass rusher in round number 1, and they want to add to their secondary in round number 2. The Notre Dame corner, I think, is a good target to watch for. Now, unfortunately, he did not show us a lot in 2024. Had a season-ending hip injury halfway through the year. And for as young as he is to suffer a hip injury, that's a big red flag to me, because that's something that usually doesn't go away very quickly. So this is going to be something that teams have to be comfortable with from a medical standpoint. If the Falcons do become comfortable with the injuries he had in college, you're going to find one of the best corners in this class. I think this could be the potential of, how did he fall to 46? Oh, he had some medical stuff in college. Who cares about that? He got healthy. Like, that's how high this kid's ceiling is. But if the hip injury slows him down and some other injuries as well, it's going to be looked at as a complete bust, kind of like Caleb Farley going to the Titans a few years ago out of Virginia Tech in round 1. One other name I'll highlight here in this group is Jeanty Tuimoloau. That is the Ohio State defensive end. He had an incredible end to the 2024 season for the Buckeyes. He was a huge part of that national championship run. I think he had 4 to 5 sacks in the college football playoff. It could be even more than that. So this is a high production player who was a huge time recruit for the Buckeyes. A little bit of a slow burn early on at Columbus, but his last year he showed why he was a big time get for Ryan Day. Moving on to round out the rest of round 2 of this draft. No one here really jumps out to me a ton. Maybe the Notre Dame safety Xavier Watts or Tate Ratledge out of Georgia, if you wanted to replace Drew Dahlman. But we got the Saints trading up for a quarterback, Will Howard. So get ready for that maybe. Jacob Parrish going to the Bills, another corner. And Landon Jackson and Alfred Collins, 2 defensive linemen to round out picks 63 and 64. Collins is a name that I'll also bring up because as we talk about round 2 targets, this could be another Grady Jarrett-like replacement. Look at the size, 6'5", 330 pounds. The big fellows, that weight tends to fluctuate a little bit, and that might be going down because teams want players at a controlled weight where they can go at a high level for more than what they were playing in college. But this is a 3 technique, so like Grady Jarrett, where he's not a traditional nose tackle. The pass rush is probably not going to be as good as Jarrett, but I think he's going to have a good career in the NFL. So to wrap it all up, let's recap what the Falcons did in this mock. Mike Green, defensive end out of Marshall. Darius Alexander, defensive tackle out of Toledo. I'd give this a C. Like, you got to weigh the first round pick more than the second round pick. I like this pick. I don't love this pick. I like it. I would love it if it was 2 other guys, Jalen Walker, Will Campbell. But they go before you. You don't have a say in the matter. You could do better than Darius Alexander at pick 46 in my eyes. That's going to do it for us on today's episode. Really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out, and I'll see everyone next time.